All right, everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today, we're tackling those travel anxieties. You know those ones? Let's be real. Flying, even at the best of times, it can be a bit, well, stressful, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Delays, cramped seats, turbulence.
Don't even get me started on the middle seat dilemma.
Oh, the worst. But today's story, well, let's just say it takes those in-flight jitters to a whole new level.
Definitely not your average travel hiccup.
We're talking about a recent TUI Airlines flight, Birmingham to Jamaica, all set for sunshine and beaches.
Sounds idyllic.
Yeah, until it wasn't. This news article we found, it paints a pretty intense picture of what happened. Imagine this, you're on this long-haul flight, getting settled in, maybe even catching a few winks.
Hoping for that elusive legroom.
Always, right? But then a passenger, Louis Densley, starts acting really erratically. And I'm not talking about, the usual complaints about the snack cart.
No, this sounds more serious.
This escalated quickly, threats being thrown around, saying he wants to hit someone, even punching and headbutting the seats. Can you imagine?
Oh, wow. That's beyond your typical air rage incident.
And get this, it all kicks off after he's refused alcohol.
That's a red flag right there.
Mhm.
It makes you think, was alcohol a trigger, or was there something else simmering beneath the surface? It's often a bit of both, isn't it?
Definitely a recipe for disaster, and sadly, a disaster it became. Densley's behavior was so disruptive they had to divert the entire flight, emergency landing in Bermuda.
Wow. Emergency landing. That's not just an inconvenience. That's a serious safety concern for everyone on board.
Exactly. Talk about a domino effect. You've got disrupted travel plans, safety concerns, not to mention the legal ramifications for Mr. Densley.
And I imagine there were quite a few.
Oh, absolutely. He ended up with a hefty $3,000 fine for threatening the crew and endangering others. But here's where things get really interesting. His defense, they're claiming he has severe anxiety, a fear of heights, and to make matters worse, it was his first time ever flying.
First time flying. Wow. I mean, that's a lot to process, especially if you already have a fear of heights, but to the point of becoming physically aggressive.
Right. And it makes you wonder how much of this behavior was driven by fear and how much was, well, something else.
It's a question that often comes up in these situations. Fear of flying is incredibly common, and for someone experiencing it for the first time, that fear can be incredibly intense. But it's important to remember that everyone reacts to fear differently.
Absolutely. And in this case, Densley's defense also claims he has limited memory of the events. They're implying that stress and maybe the alcohol could have caused some kind of blackout.
Right, and that's where things get a bit more complex. Stress, particularly extreme stress like that, it triggers a rush of hormones, things like cortisol, and those hormones can actually interfere with the hippocampus.
The hippocampus, that's the part of the brain that deals with memory, right?
Exactly. It's responsible for memory consolidation, the process of turning short-term memories into long-term ones. Now, throw alcohol into the mix, which also disrupts hippocampal activity, and you can see how someone might have fragmented or incomplete memories of a highly stressful event.
So it's possible that his memory of the event is genuinely hazy.
It's possible, but that doesn't excuse the behavior.
Of course not. But it does raise a lot of questions about individual responsibility and how we as a society address mental health, especially when it comes to travel. This situation, though, it does make you wonder, what can someone do if they're dealing with a fear of flying? What resources are out there?
Well, thankfully, there are a lot of great resources available now. Therapy, for starters, can be incredibly effective. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, it's particularly helpful in these cases.
How so?
CBT helps individuals identify and challenge those negative thought patterns that are often at the root of phobias, like fear of flying.
So it's about reframing those thoughts, understanding what triggers them.
Exactly. It's about giving people the tools to manage their anxiety in a healthy way. And then there are other options too, like virtual reality programs, believe it or not.
Oh, like flight simulators.
Sort of, but more targeted. These VR programs, they simulate the flying experience, everything from takeoff to landing. They allow people to gradually acclimate to the sensations, the sounds, the movements, all within a controlled environment. Can be really helpful for desensitization.
So they can sort of practice flying without actually being thousands of feet in the air?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and let's not forget about support groups. The power of shared experience and knowing you're not alone, it can be incredibly empowering.
Absolutely. It's like having a co-pilot for those anxious thoughts, helping you navigate through the turbulence.
I like that analogy. And, this whole situation, it really highlights the need for more awareness and support, not just for passengers, but also for the airline staff who are often on the front lines of these situations.
You're right. Imagine dealing with that kind of situation at 30,000 feet.
It's a lot of pressure. Providing airline staff with adequate training, things like de-escalation techniques, recognizing the signs of distress, it's absolutely crucial.
It seems like a small thing, but it could make a world of difference.
Absolutely. And maybe even offering some pre-flight resources for passengers with anxiety, some simple things like breathing exercises or information on how to contact support services if they need them. Just creating that more understanding and supportive environment from the ground up.
Because at the end of the day, everyone deserves to feel safe and supported, whether they're on the ground or up in the air.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, this deep dive into what started as one flight story, it's really opened up a much larger conversation about mental health, hasn't it? It makes you think, what if there had been more awareness, more support available? Could this whole situation have been prevented?
It's a question worth pondering.
It really is. And listeners, that's something for all of us to think about, not just when we're flying, but in our everyday lives as well.